is how the Brooklyn Museum has thought about it. How can we grant additional access? How can we get people engaged in a new way? And I think what they're finding is, hey, we actually got this younger demographic, and we found a way to kind of connect with them in a way that they want to be connected with. And so I think they've kind of bridged that gap and made that engagement. So I think when we talk about engagement, when you get to that stage, you want to think about kind of asking good questions. So and thinking about how to kind of get engaged with a community. So one thing to really think about is don't just think about it as marketing, but think about kind of all the areas. And so typically, most museums will have kind of these kind of 4 big areas. You've got sort of your development area, education and programming sometimes together, and your kind of exhibit or curatorial. So how can you get content from all of these folks? How can people have additional access to these things? How can they be looking at different things? Also in the engagement, you're also able to start asking kind of questions of people. So find out people who are the super users. So these are the folks who are on all the time, who are commenting a lot. These are great people to know. These are people who can become social networking champions for you. They're the ones who you should have in and find out how are they doing it? How would they recommend doing this? How can they reach out to more friends? How can they find more people like that? You want to look for these people. You have now a kind of view into people's lives, and you have a transcript of all the interactions that are happening. You need to make use of that transcript and find out what's happening. You can start polling, I think, asking good questions. Start asking, what would you like to see? How would you like to see things? Here's a poll. You can ask people just to tweet back about it or a status update about it or comment on something. Start soliciting these conversations. And I think what your ultimate goal here in the engagement is to build ownership. So, people feel like their social network is their place, right? So give them ownership over the social networking channels that you have. Really help them to own that, and that will build a relationship with you through the internet, through social media platforms, with your institution. So again, if we take a look back here, we've got the sort of 4 stages, which is the first, the gather and publish. So how you collect followers, get out there, promote what you're doing, create a content strategy, think about what are people interested in, be authentic and be transparent. Watch for the interaction, watch for that tipping point where you start to have community happen. And then when that happens, start to engage and start by joining the discussion. You're not the big dog coming in. You're part of the conversation. Everyone's equal. And I think if you take that approach, you'll really see that there's a good value that way. So this was the kind of first phase. We had 2 ideas that we're thinking about. So the first was, how can you create some online properties using social media and get people to kind of engage with you through that? And a lot of that is sort of thinking through your content strategy. That's really going to be the thing that's going to keep you moving forward. The next thing is to think a little bit about how are people using social media? What can you do, and how can you use what people like to do with social media to get them to talk about you? And the one big area we're going to talk about today is creativity. So I think, and this concept of the museum as a place where you create art, where you have this interaction, it's one of those debates that's going on right now. Should a place be a kind of viewing place, or should it be a place where this creativity happens? I think creativity is sort of key, and this publishing concept is sort of key to social networking. And so we're going to really focus in and say, yeah, we think that social networking should be a place where that should be happening. So what we see is social media is really a place of creation and commenting. So people are creating and sharing photos, videos, and text. So you're posting content, people are blogging, people are talking about their experiences. And all of these tools are all about commenting and participating. So I can read this, and immediately I'm having a 2-way interaction. I'm saying, I didn't have that same experience, or I disagree with you, or I had that same experience, this is really great, or thanks for putting this up, I'm going to take a look at that, or this looks really fun. So this kind of concept of creating and then having these conversations online is really important. And also altering and reusing content is what we see the data shows that people are doing a lot of, especially in the teen and the 20-something audience. That this idea of finding content that's online and either reusing it or passing that. Some of that's just passing videos along. Some of that's using parts of things that they find or photos that they find. I think when we take a look at this study from the kind of the Museum and Library Services group, I think they've put together some ways of thinking about sort of where museums are going. And a lot of it is around this concept of creativity. So as you'll see, the 20th Century Museum is a sort of content-driven, it's tangible objects. There's a one-way communication. You have sort of presentation and display. It acts kind of on its own. The institution leads this kind of content development. As you'll notice, these are a lot of Web 1.0 ideas that we're talking about, right? Centralized authority, pushing out content. They're the source. There's not a lot of interaction. If you look at the sort of the 21st century, you'll see, and this study was talking about sort of both museums online and offline, but you'll see the sort of combination of audience and content driven. So, it's not just the museum that's making things anymore. You're having these kind of co-created experiences that are happening. You're focusing on the engagement and experiences. And I think that term experience is really important. So I think for the kind of postmodern generation and the Gen Ys, that this idea of that the experience is more important, and really wanting to lead with that, and really wanting to just show that. I think that's what the power of social media has allowed us to do, sort of show people the experience that way. So I think you'll see these too, and I think a lot of this is around, kind of to our point, the creativity and this kind of co-creation of content, and who's talking about that. That stuff is just as relevant and valid, and people feel that way. They feel that you are now part of the discussion. The museum is not the number one thing in the center, but you are part of the discussion, and that other people's points of view are need to be heard and validated as well. They may not, to your eyes, be right or wrong, but you need to encourage people to be part of that conversation. So we're going to take one sort of slice of this concept of creativity, and lots of people have talked about different ways, but I think photography and video, I just see it on the increase over and over again. So the number of videos that people are producing, the increase of cell phone usage with photos, the ability to kind of share those photos through text messages and Facebook and email instantly is only going to increase over time. And so I think this is a kind of key way of creativity as well. So I think we want to talk about why they're so powerful and how you can use them. So one, I think people don't remember this, but the web is primarily a visual medium. So when we do website design projects, one of the things we talk to people about is that most people will visit your site for 90 seconds and they'll look at 3.5 pages. And what they're doing is they're scanning for content. So there's this term called scanification, which means rather than being satisfied, you're sort of scanning to find the thing that's most close to what you want. So you're not really reading, you're looking at headlines, you're looking at pictures, you're looking at captions. You're kind of scanning for the content that you want. You're not sitting and reading that content. So the web is primarily visual, and I think getting that shift is really a really important one. And if people don't see themselves in your photos, if they don't, as we work with museums, they don't see kids, they don't feel like there's a thing for kids. If they don't see a family event outside in the summer, they don't feel like there's a family event outside in the summer. If you can get the images there, those change people's minds. And so photos will, as I said, sort of only increase with the kind of use of mobile. So I think one of the things we saw in the recent update of Facebook for the iPhone is that the status update, the sort of what's going on now, the sort of tweeter effect of the Facebook, has now changed from just a text thing to actually a photo thing. So your status update is now a photo button as well. So you take a photo and you share that photo with everyone, as opposed to just writing, here's what's on my mind, here's what I'm up to. You take a picture of where you are. You take a picture of who you're with. And that process of sharing images is actually really important. If we take a look at the data from the kind of Pew Internet American Life Project for teens and social media, we look at half a teen saying, what happens when they take these photos? So everyone's taken photos. About half of them say people comment sometimes, and about a third say that people are commenting most of the time on their photos. So a photo drives interaction on a social networking site. I think the thing to take away. So people say 90%, they say 90% of what happens they actually get some sort of response in that way. So half of teens and 36% of adults are posting photos online. So you've got somewhere between 35 and 50% of people putting up photos all the time about different things. Now this data again is a little bit, this is from 2007, so we're, I'm sure, much more further along than we are there. But I think the key takeaway here is that people are commenting on photos. This kind of creative process of creating something, putting a photo up, and commenting on that is important. Now, I think some people have actually been able to understand this a little bit more. So this is a picture of a band called U2. You might have heard of them. And they, I was at a concert with them, and one thing that struck me was the thousands and thousands of phones and cameras. Now, this is copyrighted material, and I think this is a big challenge that museums come up against. It's a copyrighted performance, it's copyrighted music, but they didn't care. They let thousands of people take videos and photos, and all these things showed up the next day on Facebook and Twitter. And in fact, there's so much traffic that it was about 10 minutes to get a tweet or text out of the stadium. So I think this ability to kind of take photos and push it out is a huge, huge thing, and it's powerful because of what we're talking about, that people like to create, they like to share their experiences, and it actually creates more interactions happening. And so I think to get your kind of promotion out there, I think museums need to start thinking a little bit about how can your photo policies be a little more open. And I think this is challenging, but I think it's the way that people are relating to one another. And if you can kind of leverage that, then you're actually kind of leveraging your name, and you're becoming increasingly relevant. You're engaging new audiences. You're allowing them to relate the way that they like to, and then pushing that out. Now, one way that you can do this is kind of through photo sharing. So you can have things like Flickr, and this is an example from a site called World Usability Day, and they run events all over the world on one day about usability. And one of the things they do is you'll see this kind of small picture, which is not the most attractive one, but it's from Prune, India, and it talks about they took photos of the events that were going on. And they posted them to Flickr, and they put a tag that said World Usability Day, and then they showed up in this photo feed. This is a great way to kind of get people to share photos. You could have, if you have a youth event or you have a young adults night, let people take pictures, encourage them, kind of say, post your pictures to Flickr, tag them this way, and they show up on the site. So I think this is a great advantage for you. One, it gets you new photos on your site. Two, it engages people. They've done something with your institution. They've created something as part of that experience, and they've shared that experience with their friends. So not only are they promoting it through their social networks, they're promoting it on your site, and you're kind of building this affinity that's happening. So it's a way to allow people to share memories. So I think this is a way where you're wanting to starting to think a little bit more about, as I said, sort of how can you encourage kind of open photo policies that way? Because I think it's one way that there can be a barrier to some of that happening. So just to recap, I think there's two main ways that we're thinking about how to engage people with social media. One is this pathway of creating pathways, creating content, and then starting to interact with things. The second is leveraging ideas about what these generations, different generations, the younger generations especially, want to do and how they're using social networks, and how you can tap into that to allow them to share the experiences that they're having with your institution, how they're doing the things that they want to about you, and that's helping to create both an affinity with you as well as to share that information with other people and bring other folks into that. So we're going to take a quick pause for about 60 seconds to take a look for questions. There's a chat, as I said, on the GoToWebinar toolbar. Feel free to put those things in, and we'll be back in a minute.